Trip Watson. Trip has been working with our company for 2 years now as our legal counsel, and he specializes in entrepreneurship law, I guess, and trademarks and all that kind of stuff. And he loves helping people grow their business, and he's done a great job for us in that aspect. And good friend and good attorney, Trip Watson.
Thank you, Greg. First things first, who here is a current or past entrepreneur? Okay. Who here wants to be an entrepreneur? Okay. Who here works with people that are entrepreneurs? And who here is also a member of the Vestavia Chamber? Should be everybody if you're not joining. What we're here to talk about today is why entrepreneurs are happier people than just regular folks working in businesses. I work with entrepreneurs on a daily basis. I help them get rolling, get them built up, and then ultimately sell them. So that whole process, most of the work for me and for a lot of business owners comes in on the very, very front end. It's very stressful, lots of work, but you'll consistently notice that entrepreneurs are much happier in what they do. A lot of people want to be entrepreneurs. So let's throw out some of the ideas of what we think the dream job of being an entrepreneur is. We think that we get flexible hours. Oh well, if I work for myself, I can work from home. I could I don't necessarily have to start at 9 o'clock in the morning. I don't necessarily have to work all the way to 5. We think that we get high income earning potential as being an entrepreneur. This gives us an opportunity to make some real money. We also think that you get to do what you love, which is the common theme that you hear of folks that are starting the businesses. We also think that since we're working at home, the commute's not so bad either. You also get to make your own business cards, which is a nice part. And you get to be your own boss. This is the one that people consistently go to, is I get to be my own boss. If you think that this is what entrepreneurship is, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. The realities of entrepreneurship. In case y'all can't see that, it says depression. I had a lot of friends on that Death Star. The reality is entrepreneurs are constantly working. 57% of entrepreneurs give up personal time on a very consistent basis. They defer their income for months and maybe even years. I've heard of a couple that have deferred income for over a decade. So it's not necessarily a great money-making opportunity, at least on the front end. You don't actually get to do what you love all the time. It's something called the E-Myth principle, if anyone's ever heard of that book or read about it. You don't always get to do the things that you love because you end up getting caught up in the management of your business. You're always on the road, always marketing, always trying to fix problems. The commute is much worse than it was the first time around. But you do get to make your own business cards, so that is perfect. And instead of having only one boss, you have dozens, hundreds, and potentially thousands of bosses that are all looking for an excuse to fire you and not give you money anymore. All this leads up to stress. Statistics show and studies show that it is twice as stressful as managing a personal relationship like a marriage. It is 3 times as stressful as raising a child. And it is 4 times as stressful as managing your own personal finances. Owning a business is a stressful activity, but 77% of business owners say that they very much or extremely love their job. The greater population says 22% dislike their job. They just don't like it. And then 44% hate their jobs. 66% of the general population can't stand to work where they're working. But 77% of entrepreneurs love going to work every single day. So why is that? Why are people so happy? 82% of respondents say that they get to commit time to other activities that they like. That's charity work. They get to spend time with their families. Because they do get a little bit of say in their schedule, they get to commit that time that they wouldn't otherwise be able to commit. 88% have strong relationships with their customers. They see their customers. They talk to their customers. They email their customers. When their customers have a problem, they come to them. But also when their customers love them, who's the first person they talk to? 94% have a personal connection with their employees. They get to see the people that work for them. They get a personal relationship with them, and they know them. In small businesses, you know the owner. You have a personal relationship with them, and that's very fulfilling for a lot of entrepreneurs. And an overwhelming 97% say that they get a personal pride and sense of accomplishment out of what they did. When they show up to work, they're doing something that they like to do. Even if it's the individual tasks stink, they get the big picture. And the big picture is fulfilling and gives them a sense of accomplishment. So why, after knowing all of these stresses, everything that goes into it, what ultimately makes people take the step? Why do they make the leap? And I have this little demotivator. It says, legacy. It took millions of years to create something this extraordinary. You have about 74. A lot of people like the startup. A lot of folks like coming in. They like, about 60% of respondents have said that they just like the culture of other people that own their own businesses. It's an exciting culture to be in. A lot of folks have a business idea that they want to take and they want to market and they want to make sure that they get the benefit of it. It's, I've got this great idea and I don't want somebody else making millions of dollars off of it. They also think that it's an opportunity to build wealth. Is that they realize that getting a paycheck on a day-to-day basis doesn't actually build wealth. It builds income, but it doesn't necessarily build wealth. They also just want the opportunity and the responsibility of running a business. They like the stress. About 70% of entrepreneurs have said that they like the responsibility. The job that they signed on for was a stressful, responsible job. They also don't like to work for other people. I can speak to this. I don't work well with others. So a lot of folks just like to be able to get out and say, you know what? I don't like having to work for that one boss. I'd rather have a lot of other bosses, but I get to dictate how they work with me. There's also an overwhelming sense of urgency. Most business owners that I've run across, and this is anecdotal, I don't have a lot of statistics to back this up, but a lot of entrepreneurs that you'll meet have a sense of urgency. They feel the need that they have to do something, and it can't wait until they're 65 years old. It can't wait even until 5 years down the road. It needs to happen now. And that's one of the things that I commonly see. Who are entrepreneurs? Up here I have every entrepreneur's superhero, which is Richard Branson. Literally a guy that's the stereotypical entrepreneur. But most entrepreneurs don't fit into one particular age category. They range from as young as 18 years old to as old as 75. They run the gamut in between. The average age is 40, but that doesn't mean anything because they fill up every single category. And not any one particular category in a significantly larger portion than any other. This is an interesting statistic. 42% are firstborns. A plurality of folks that start their own businesses are the very firstborn in their family. And also, interestingly enough, a majority are the very first ones in their family to open a business. A lot of people think that, I know it was in my family, is that starting a business kind of runs in the family. And that's not necessarily true. A lot of the folks that go out on their own typically came from the opposite, is that they never had any close or even distant family members that have ever owned their business. And that was one of the things that they wanted to get. 70% are married. This is not a young person's game where there's a lot of folks that don't have a lot of responsibilities or other kind of responsibilities at home, financially or personally. These are folks that are married. There are also folks that have kids. They have little financial responsibilities at home that can't go out and work. and they got to get tennis shoes for and food and make sure that everybody's taking care of on that. So I'll tell you a little bit about me because I'm kind of the stereotypical the entrepreneur, and that's me keeping it classy in Germany. I came from a family of entrepreneurs. My father owned his own business. My grandfather owned his own business. My cousins have started their own businesses. And I think if my little sisters weren't out of college and grad school yet, they would have already started their own businesses. And that's what I kind of came from. My father started his own business. He was in his mid to late 30s, and I was relatively young. And so I got to see a lot of it. I knew the transition. I can look back now, and I can remember the transition of going from a steady income to going into the world of entrepreneurship. I remember going from the nice house into the small house that was a little bit more affordable. I remember having the drywall walls without paint because we couldn't afford the paint for the first few years, and that was not a necessary expense, but tennis shoes were. So I knew kind of how that was. I also saw how my father's business grew and how he ultimately took it into and ultimately sold it. But one of the things that happened that really changed my life and gave me that sense of urgency was when my father was diagnosed with brain tumor when he was 53 about. He was given 1.5 years to live, and it didn't matter how successful it was, it didn't matter how much money you could throw at it. This was a problem that was going to kill him. And he died in his mid-50s a few years ago. Now, the reason I tell this story is, first off, it's cathartic for me to talk about it, but it's secondly also very important to recognize this, and to recognize the sense of urgency that comes with most entrepreneurs. Is my grandfather passed away before he was 60. My father died when he was in his mid-50s. For my family, most of the men in my family never saw retirement. Working for 30 years, and then hoping to get the VP position or maybe getting a retirement pension or package was never an option. So there became pretty immediately a sense of urgency in my life. And I notice this in a lot of entrepreneurs that I meet with and work with on a daily basis. Most of them have had some event in their life, whether it's happened with a close family member or whether it's happened with them, that they decide, you know what, this just doesn't matter. I want to do things that make me happy. And so that's what a lot of the entrepreneurs that you'll see. So I started in 2001 with my business. I had a formal education, but I didn't really have what you would call business management experience. And this is actually one of the interesting things you'll also see about entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs have about 2.5 years of actual real-world work experience in their field. Most have less than 2 years. So everybody thinks that there's these entrepreneurs that know everything that there is to know about their industry. That's actually a hindrance in starting a business. You can actually know too much about your particular industry, and it can prevent your ability to break out. So this was actually something that I realized after the fact that I shared in common with a lot of the folks that I work with. So in 2011, I started my firm. I've been doing this for the past 2 years. What I do is I help people build, capitalize, and ultimately sell their companies. So it's mainly transactional work. I tell a lot of folks I send the litigation stuff to Bob. But what that means is that I'm not a litigation attorney, I'm not a commercial attorney, I'm not a bankruptcy attorney, I'm not a divorce attorney, I'm an entrepreneur attorney. That's what I do. So a lot of people ask me, what do you need to do in order to get started? Okay, we've decided, all right, we know that it's stressful. We know that it's scary. We know that there's really no guaranteed income flow. How do we get started? What's the steps to take? And I like this Nietzsche quote. When one is finished building one's house, one suddenly realized that in the process, one has learned something that one really needed to know in the worst way before one began. So how do you get started? Very first thing, I don't have some cute anagram for this, and I wish I did, but it's identify, solve, leap, persevere, deal, which I'll get to, and exit. Identify. A problem well put is half solved. A lot of entrepreneurs think, okay, well, I've got this great idea. What's the very first thing that a business needs in order to get started? A product, right? You need to have a product or a service. It's not the first step. If you've developed a product or a service, you have nothing. What you need to do is identify the problem. The problem ultimately drives the solution. I talk to a lot of people that say, hey, I've got this awesome idea. It's so cool. It's easy to work with. It does this. It does this. It sells itself. Right there, that's, if anybody ever tells you that it sells itself, it doesn't. They don't want to sell it, so they want you to. But that's kind of the leading indicator right there. The problem drives the solution. Find something on a day-to-day basis or on a monthly basis or on a consistent basis that people have problems with. And then solve that solution. Apple, one of the largest companies on the planet, almost went bankrupt in the 90s until they solved a relatively simple problem. Who here works out? Like to go on jogs? Who here has a power song? Has anybody ever tried to play a power song with a Discman? Yeah, that doesn't work so well. You start running, you start going, and don't stop. Billy, yeah, it skips. So the problem they solved is how do we get music to people that they can listen to? Not a huge problem. Nobody would say it was a world-beating problem. But it was a problem that thousands, hundreds of thousands of people had, and they were willing to pay $100 to $200 to have solved. I want my music on the go, and I don't want it to skip. I don't want to have to carry a book of CDs whenever I'm driving down to the beach and I want to listen to it. So they solved a relatively simple problem. Made millions of dollars in the process. They've also employed hundreds of thousands of people. A tiny little problem had a huge solution. So remember, the problem drives the solution. So figure out the problem. Figure out the scope of the problem, how big it is, how many people does it affect. Then also boil it down to what it results in terms of lost time and money. People that don't necessarily have the money to spend on certain types of things realize that they could spend more time getting, I have a very simple program that I spend $10 a month. It's called Hootsuite. It allows me to post to several different social networking sites all at once. Over the course of my day, that takes 5 minutes. Over the course of my week, it takes a half hour. Over the course of my month, it takes a couple of hours. That's worth $10 to me. Solve the problem. Albert Einstein. If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd think 55 minutes. I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solutions. Remember, this problem solves the solution. Develop the solution, not the product, then test the solution. This is where you actually have to start doing legwork as an entrepreneur. A lot of this is beforehand is creative. Oh, let's think about this, think about this, think about this. You start weeding off about 5% of the people here. Let's actually start testing the solution. Let's start figuring out ways. Oh, let's figure out a pretty simple problem. Your car's dirty. Let's wash your car. See how long it takes. See whether people like you washing their car. Do simple things that you can figure out to see if the solution actually works. Get feedback on the solution. People like the way that it worked. Then follow up after a period of time to make sure that people's opinions about your product or service hasn't changed. Very basic. Now, the big thing. This is basic legwork in any business started. What's the number one thing that prevents people from opening business?
Fear.
The leap. The most difficult thing is the decision to act. The rest is mere tenacity. The fears are paper tigers. You can do anything you decide to do. You can act to change and control your life, and the procedure, the process is its own reward. The hardest leap, which 99% of entrepreneurs will never take, is the decision to start their own business. It's typically a decision that they are forced into. They are laid off, they get divorced, they move, they have some other life-changing event that was unplanned, and now they are forced to start their own business. This means that all the planning that they could have taken, should have taken for the year ahead of time, didn't happen. They're forced to back it in. This is a problem that many entrepreneurs run into. It's not fatal, but it's definitely a big problem. So the very first thing that you have to do is set a date. There's a reason that we have a marriage ceremony. I'm getting married next month, so I use this as an analogy. The reason that we use a marriage ceremony is because it's clearly identified. It's telling all of your ex-girlfriends and boyfriends to go beat it, but you're now taking it. It's also a very visible ceremony that this is now who you're committed to and what you're committed to. It's very important. It's very visible. We set a date. We don't say, oh, well, I guess 3 months ago we started marrying. No, we were married on this day. And we set it, we plan it, we do everything about it. The business, starting a business needs to be the exact same way. You don't smooth into a business, just the same way that you don't smooth into a wedding. You're not just, it is one thing. You are an entrepreneur one day and you are not an entrepreneur the other. So you've got to figure out where that defining line is, because that will decide everything else. You've got to set that day, you've got to put it on your calendar, you've got to put reminders on it. The biggest thing is, you got to tell everybody that you know. I am starting my business on January 1, 2011. I told every single family member and every single friend that I had that that's when I was starting my business. Why? Because if you don't start it, everybody's going to say, that guy doesn't keep his promises. Now you have external responsibility. Other folks are going to be interested in what you're doing. They want to know about it. So after you set the date, you tell everybody about the date. Same thing like a wedding. You send invitations. You have a witness there. Why is the witness there? So if anybody ever says, no, we didn't actually get married, there's the witness that says, actually, I was there. This is the same purpose. You tell your friends, I'm starting this business. So when you come back and say, I didn't really start that business, somebody else says, yeah, we did. You don't follow through on things. Make plans. Do your research. Make sure that everything's set up so that you get rolling ahead of time. Don't think that you're going to start a business next week. It's not going to happen. It's a long period of time. Set the date, get rolling, and do what you need to do ahead of time to get that rolled out. Burn the ships. It's an ancient story of a conqueror that came in and burned the ship so that they didn't have any opportunity of going back. Now, I'm not saying that you burn every bridge that you've ever had. But if you work as a business as part-time, it will always be a part-time job. I have never seen anybody do a part-time business that's succeeded. It just doesn't happen. You've got to take the step. The leap is not partially. You can't be kind of married so that you can still date other people. That's not being married. Starting a business and still having other businesses is not running a business. It's the same concept. Persevere. Now this is where the stress comes in. This is what a lot of people don't know when they start a business. They say, oh yeah, well I've got this fantastic product, I've got this great idea, it's going to sell itself, everybody's going to be happy, it's going to be amazing, I'm going to be a millionaire next month. Not at all. Experience is simply the name we give to our mistakes. The first year is the easiest year of running a business. Yeah, you have no money. Yeah, it's exciting. That's what's kind of keeping you going. Then second year comes. Most businesses don't make money on a monthly basis for the first year and a half to 2 years. They will, on a month-to-month basis, lose money. And lose a lot of money. If you're not planning for this, you're going to be really surprised when in October you owe $8,000, and then in November you owe $15,000, and then in December you owe $20,000. That can get a little disheartening. But if you haven't planned ahead for it, it can be a game changer. But most businesses are this. Even successful businesses, franchises that have this down to a science, will say, listen, you're going to spend all this money, but it's going to take you a while in order to start making money on a monthly basis. So it's going to take about 1.5 years, 2 years for you to actually be able to pay your employees just from the revenues that you make from your business. So you've got to have some kind of financing. You need to talk to the bankers in the back in order to make sure that you have financing to carry you through the first 2 years. Talk to family members. Family members are great. They don't have a lot of money, but you're never going to have more honest feedback about your business, because if they might say, oh yeah, it's a great idea, but when you ask for a check, they're going to be honest with you. I got family financing to start my business. And everything that I thought was awesome about my business, they could not care less about as soon as they had to pull out the checkbook. Well, what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about this? Bankers, I love the guys. They give a lot of money, but they're not going to work through the details of it. You've got to have those details worked out before you talk to them. Your family members are going to work through those with you. Like I said, most businesses are what we call cash flow negative for the first 2 years. That means on a monthly basis they're not making money. And a lot of businesses aren't profitable, which means they haven't paid back the losses that they've incurred in the first 2 years until 5 to 7 years down the line. It's not uncommon. There's a lot of businesses that have a 12-year payback period. Know that going into it. Deal. I stole this from Timothy Ferriss, 4-Hour Work Week. This is a great way to boil down the day-to-day operations of your business if you're ever thinking about building a business that you want to be able to sell. He calls it DEAL. He does have a cute little acronym. I don't. Definition. Basically, that's defining what we've talked about, what your scope of business is, what your scope within your business is. Eliminate tasks that you're not doing on a day-to-day basis so that you're freed up to operate as a business owner and not necessarily as an employee in your own company. Automate things that need to be automated. Use other delegation, use technology. And then liberation. Getting yourself to a situation where you can exit your business and your business operates as your insurance. Now, I throw that in there just because I do mention my source. Read it. It's a long book. It's very good, very informative if you're talking about a business. I don't agree with everything in it, but there's a lot of good information if you want to start a business. Now, finally, the exit. The reason why the exit is so important is if you have to show up to work every single day as a business owner, your business is worth nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nobody is going to pay $1 for your business. They might pay for your cabinetry, they might pay for your cookware, they might pay for your car, they might pay for your real estate if you own it. But if you've got to show up every single day between 8 and 6 and you've got to work Saturdays, nobody's ever going to pay anything. So in order to make real value from a business, you have to remove the business owner from the day-to-day business. He who is brave is free. The person that's willing to make the risks and delegate to people is ultimately going to be the person that can exit the business. You ultimately have to start making these decisions at the very beginning. How you exit the business is going to be very much determinative of how you run it. Because if you're gearing up to go public, that's a very different strategy than if you're going to farm it off to an employee or a family member. It's going to be a very different strategy than if you're going to go and get venture capital investment or franchise. Every single one of these gives its own costs and benefits, and if you're not planning on day one for at least gearing towards one of those exits, then you're not going to be having a very good situation 10 to 15 years down the line when you realize that your business isn't worth it. Secondly, develop value, not just revenue. A lot of folks are built on sales. Let's build up revenue for the company. But that's not necessarily the value in the company. The value in the company is reoccurring, consistent revenue from established customers. It's also intellectual property, things that you own. One of the most valuable pieces of intellectual property on the planet is Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola, the word, means nothing. It in and of itself doesn't drive a single dollar in revenue. But it is a brand that everybody recognizes, and it is worth billions. Know what the people that you're going to sell to are looking for. VCs are looking for something different than angels. Angels are looking for something different than franchisees. And ultimately, shareholders, if you go public, are looking for something very different from that. Act with the plan in mind. Go ahead, set that out, lay it out, keep it only between you and a couple of close advisors like your accountant and your attorney. Because that plan is going to determine a lot of things that run your business, and if somebody else knows about it, they can leak it to a third party, and that can hurt you. But if you don't operate with a plan, the plan will never happen. So you will never exit your business if there's no exit strategy. Finally, that's all I have. If y'all have any questions, I'm wide open.